Hello and welcome to The Interview. Our guest today is Seth D Harris, former U.S. Secretary of Labor and a member of President Barack Obama's cabinet. Mr. Harris, welcome to WION.
Palki, very nice to meet you.
We'll start with your subject, jobs. The weekly employment figures in the U.S. were better than expected the last time. The headlines said that the labor market is healing. Do you agree with this assessment?
Well, we had two sets of numbers last week. The unemployment claims numbers, which actually increased slightly. There was a technical change that the the Labor Department made that made it look like the number had gone down, but it actually gone up slightly. And we have very consistently had between 800,000 and 900,000 people filing for unemployment with states, and another 600,000 or 700,000 people filing with a federal program for self-employed people. So 1.6 million Americans filed for unemployment claims, which is an extraordinarily high number compared with what is normal. We also got the unemployment and jobs numbers last week, where we saw an improvement in the unemployment rate of 8.4%. But what we also saw was a slowing of job growth in the United States. We actually had only about 1.1 million jobs created. That is a significant decline from previous months. So the economy in the U.S. is slowing down, all because of the coronavirus pandemic.
Donald Trump said on Twitter, and I'm quoting, great job numbers, 1.37 million jobs added in August. Unemployment rate falls to 8.4%. Wow, much better than expected. Broke the 10% level faster and deeper than thought possible. Why do you think he said this?
Well, because Donald Trump is running for re-election and he wants people to believe that the economy is going extremely well. It is going quite poorly, actually. We have more than 29 million Americans receiving some kind of unemployment benefits right now. That is 1 in 5 U.S. workers who are unemployed or receiving some kind of unemployment benefits. We have rampant food insecurity in the United States, very large numbers of people who simply can't feed their families. We're now going to start seeing large numbers of Americans getting evicted from their apartments. Some are going to lose their homes. We're seeing a rising number of permanently unemployed people, meaning they're not going to be able to go back to their old jobs. They're going to have to stay in their current, they're going to have to stay in unemployment and look for new jobs. So the idea that everything is going just fine in America is a myth that Donald Trump is trying to create because he wants Americans to vote for them. But in overwhelming numbers, the American people are rejecting that false message, that lie that he's telling, just as they've rejected so many of his other lies.
All economies are suffering because of the pandemic. Could the U.S. economy have been an exception?
Well, it could have done significantly better. It didn't have to be this bad. The problem is that our leadership has utterly failed in the United States. President Trump spent more effort denying the existence of a pandemic, denying the risk to the United States, spent more time, suggesting that people drink bleach and somehow shine ultraviolet light inside their body as a solution, or take hydroxychloroquine, which is a drug for lupus and other conditions, not for treating the coronavirus. He did all of that instead of taking the very difficult, very painful, very challenging steps to fight the pandemic straight out. We have not had a national testing and tracing strategy. We have not had a national personal protective equipment strategy so that people could go back to work safely. We have not had clear, unambiguous guidance and workplace safety regulations so that employers could bring people back safely. We haven't had a national schools program to make sure that school districts could bring students back safely. It's been a complete failure at the federal level, and as a consequence of that, our economic pain has been deeper and is going to last longer than if a competent president had been in leadership in the United States.
And do you believe Joe Biden will be that competent president?
Yes, there's no question in my mind that Joe Biden will be a significantly more successful president than Donald Trump has been. And here's how I know that. He has a plan for dealing with the economy. He has a plan for controlling the pandemic. He has a plan for ensuring that when we grow our economy, that it is done fairly so that there is racial equality in the economic investments that we make, that all of America participates, not just the cronies and friends of the Donald Trump administration. So he has laid out in great detail precisely what he is going to do if he's elected president, and it's a plan that makes a tremendous amount of sense for dealing with this unique circumstance where we have both a pandemic and an economic recession, and frankly, a broken politics that's dividing the country, with the President of the United States stirring up racial animus and violence around the country.
Joe Biden's record on race has also been questioned. He's been part of groups and efforts that do not show him in very good light.
Well, Joe Biden's record on race can be summed up in the phrase, he was Barack Obama's vice president, and he's been a vigorous advocate for civil rights dating all the way back to his time as a public defender in Delaware. Joe Biden has talked about his past and repudiated things that he said in the past that he thought was wrong. Donald Trump instead is campaigning on racism and xenophobia. He is intentionally stirring up violence in some of our cities to make the point that only he stands between chaos and people in the suburbs and white voters around the country. In fact, Donald Trump is the cause of a lot of this chaos. He endorses the words of Nazis marching in Charlottesville. He endorses the behavior of right-wing extremists and white supremacist terrorists in our cities who are bringing guns to protests and shooting peaceful demonstrators. He encourages the police to take violent action against peaceful protesters across the street from the White House so he can walk to a church, raise a Bible that he's never read, and pretend to be a defender of white Christian families. All of this is intended to divide America and to try to win with a minority of the vote. Donald Trump can't get a majority vote in the United States. Instead, what he's trying to do is to suppress the vote of people who disagree with him, particularly people of color in the United States, and to bring out the vote of those who might be inspired by this fear-based rhetoric. Frankly, it's not going to work.
Would you say that the BLM protesters have discredited their own campaign by indulging in violence?
No, I don't think that's true. The Black Lives Matter protesters, as a general matter, are not the cause of the violence. They are engaged in peaceful protests trying to shine a light on police violence against communities of color. There are some agitators, anarchists and others who are looking for opportunities to just sow mayhem. That's what they do to, make a point or to make themselves feel better. But that is not what the Black Lives Matter movement is about. It is not what the movement for racial justice in the United States is about. Those protesters are focusing on a pressing and important issue that was highlighted by the death of George Floyd at under the knee of a police officer in Minneapolis, and the many, many, many other African Americans and other people of color in the United States who have faced police violence, and it's cost them their lives. That is a critically important issue, and the large majority of Americans understand that, and they see that, and they want to see police reforms in the United States. They don't want to see defunding of the police, and Joe Biden doesn't support that, but they do want to see a real effort made to address some of the systemic racism and systemic discrimination that we have in the United States.
And just playing the devil's advocate here, I've gone through the numbers, and police brutality and violence record under the Obama presidency was not necessarily better than what it is now.
Well, we don't really have clear data on that question, but the Obama administration very aggressively pressured cities with civil rights lawsuits and other efforts to get into consent decrees to reform their failures. And that actually was one of the first things that the Trump administration did, was to reverse the effort to try to reform police departments around the United States, because that's not a part of Donald Trump's agenda. He is seemingly a supporter of law enforcement violence in our cities because he thinks that's how you maintain control instead of the kind of approach that Joe Biden has taken, which is community engagement, community policing, understanding that the purpose of police is to protect everyone, to protect and serve everyone in the community, and to make sure that everyone is able to participate not only in the election that's coming up, but also in their local economy and in their community. So the Obama administration did make a big effort in this area with civil rights enforcement activity. The Trump administration abandoned that approach, and we're seeing some of the consequences of that.
Kamala Harris, the Democratic vice presidential nominee, has asked people to march on for the future of their children and grandchildren. While the Democrats hold their campaign digitally from the safety of their homes and offices, they're asking people to come out. Does this strike you as a bit selfish?
Well, Senator Harris and Vice President Biden are out campaigning even today. Senator Harris is in Milwaukee meeting with Black economic leaders, business leaders. Vice President Biden is going to be in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, giving a speech. So this argument that somehow they're cowering in a basement somewhere has never been true. They've been communicating with supporters and journalists and taking questions and interacting virtually as much as they possibly can. Senator Harris came out and protested with Black Lives Matter protesters in Washington, D.C., when those protests were at their largest. So I think that's just another false accusation against the Biden-Harris campaign. There's been lots and lots of engagement, but we have to do it in a safe way. You know, we are in the midst of a dangerous pandemic with a disease that risks people's lives. And the way to engage the community in a situation where you have a dangerous pandemic is very carefully, very safely, that follows the science. And that's what the Biden-Harris campaign is doing. That's what a Biden-Harris administration would do.
Let's talk about visas. Indian nationals accounted for 60% of the H-1B visas issued in 2019. Immigrants contribute greatly to the U.S. economy. It's all a matter of record. Is there then a need to overhaul the H-1B visa program?
I think we have to take a look at the H-1B visa program and how the United States interacts with economies like India's economy, where you have a rising middle class, you have a lot of very, very skilled English-speaking workers who integrate very well into the United States economy. But at the same time, we want to have an American immigration policy that ensures that U.S. workers have a fair shot at the good quality jobs in the United States. So I think there is a need for taking a look, particularly at some of the things that Donald Trump has done, seemingly just to cause pain to families as a way of keeping immigrants of all kind. And let me just say, not just immigrants, but non-immigrants like H-1B visa holders out of the United States. Their agenda is really, the Trump agenda is really driven by xenophobia and a white supremacist outlook on an immigration policy, rather than a really serious look at what the United States needs to grow and also to relate successfully with our allies around the world, like India. So yes, I think there is a need to take a look at the H-1B visa program as part of a larger economic package and also as a part of comprehensive immigration reform. That's something that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have talked about extensively. Our immigration system was broken even before Donald Trump took office, and Donald Trump took a hatchet to it and then poured a bunch of gasoline on it and set fire to it. We have a lot of work to do in order to rebuild the American immigration system into something that is fair, that is egalitarian, but also that helps the U.S. economy to grow.
What about the future of international students in the U.S.? How do the visa uncertainties affect them?
Well, this is one of the truly disgraceful attacks that the Trump administration has made on people who want to come to the United States to advance themselves and, frankly, also to advance the U.S. economy. And I say this not merely as a political observer, but also as a college professor. I'm delighted to teach at Cornell University. I have a number of international students who are participating in my classes, and we have a large number of students who are being shut out of the elite quality U.S. higher education system, one of the best higher education systems, maybe the best, I would argue the very best higher education system in the world. And they're being shut out for no good reason. I mean, this is one of the ways in which the U.S. improves its trade position in the world. By getting foreign students to come to the United States, many of them end up staying and contributing wonderfully to our economy. You know, very high percentage of the patents in the United States are earned by immigrants, people coming out of U.S. schools. A large number of businesses in the Forbes 100 and the Fortune 500 come out of the immigrant communities and non-immigrant communities. So this is just a self-defeating, ideologically driven approach that the Trump administration has taken, and it has failed because, you know, our higher education system is so potent and so effective that folks from around the world want to come and participate. So I think that will go away with Donald Trump, and we'll get back to interacting with students around the world and inviting them back to the United States.
There's talk of breaking China's monopoly on supply chains. The Indian Prime Minister spoke about this last week. There are new alliances that are taking shape. Is the world, according to you, moving in the right direction?
They are. The United States particularly needs to focus on rebuilding manufacturing, and particularly manufacturing supply chains, and especially supply chains for critical products like pharmaceuticals. You know, one of the things that the coronavirus pandemic exposed that Donald Trump really did nothing to try to fix was that so much of U.S. manufacturing has been offshored that we are vulnerable when there is a pandemic like this to having extreme shortages of many of the most important products that we need. So one of Joe Biden's strategies is to bring manufacturing back to the United States, particularly manufacturing supply chains. He's going to do that by reversing the tax cut that Donald Trump gave to companies that offshore American jobs, and instead encouraging the creation of jobs in the United States with the tax code, and also using the immense power of the United States government as a purchaser of goods and services to focus on making products in the United States. So this is a big emphasis for Vice President Biden and Senator Harris, and it's been a big failure of the Trump administration. There are plants, manufacturing plants, that have closed all across the industrial Midwest, but also all around the country, because he has no true manufacturing policy. We've seen a manufacturing recession in the United States under President Trump. We need to make a change.
And I understand that this is the U.S. presidential election. Only Americans vote, but people across the world are interested in the outcome. For our audience in India and South Asia, why would a Biden presidency be better than a Trump presidency?
I'll start very simply with India's direct interest in this election is that there's only one ticket that has an Indian American on it. Kamala Harris, of course, is famously a daughter of India, as well as a daughter of the Black community in the United States. That would really be a historic moment to have an Indian American elected as Vice President of the United States. But what we will see under Joe Biden is a return to normalcy, a return to the America that the world has gotten to know and rely on, an economic partner, a national security partner, someone who is able to talk not only with our adversaries, but with our friends. President Trump has gone out of his way to insult American allies. Joe Biden knows all of those allies and will reform our alliances while keeping an eye on focus on rebuilding the American economy. So it is a return to a time when India and the United States could have mature, sophisticated, intelligent discussions about our shared interests, our shared commitment to democracy, a commitment that Donald Trump absolutely does not share, and that some of India's neighbors, frankly, don't share. And there is a real effort to rebuild the kind of strong, serious alliance that India and the United States have, and I think both countries need.
Seth D Harris, thank you very much for joining us here on WION.
My pleasure talking to you. Thank you.